Hey, welcome back to Better Than Yourself. Today on Better Than Yourself, I'm gonna make a sauerkraut of some kind of non-traditional ingredients. Instead of green cabbage, I'm gonna use red cabbage. Instead of the usual, like allspice berries and caraway seeds, I thought we'd do a little bit of seaweed and some ginger and kind of do an Asian thing. I got my University of Hong Kong shirt on. Thank you, Brian. And I found a really cool little, this is an Asian, mostly Korean I think is the origin of these fermenting boxes. But it's a box with an inner box that has a silicone gasket around it and a little air flap here. And you can press all of your veg down into the box and that kind of holds it under the level of the liquid, right? The little air flap lets it bubble and then you put the outer lid on. And you can keep it in your living room, in your bedroom, in your kitchen, and it won't smell. It kind of keeps all that stinky sort of fermentation smell contained. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Another thing I want to play with is this. This is a cabbage shredder from I don't know what millennia. It was actually kind of a hand-me-down from my father, who was a big sauerkraut maker. So he hooked me up with this. He made me a little shuttle, and we'll play with this a little further into the video. But what we need to do, just like always, we're gonna cut up our veg. We're gonna salt it. I'm thinking probably like a 2.5% brine. We'll play with that. We'll chop up our flavoring ingredients, and then we'll pack everything into the press box. So stay tuned, and let's get right into this. All right. So the first order of business is to get these cabbages cut up. Like I said, this is an antique cabbage slicer, slaw maker. You probably won't find it. You can look for one on eBay. To find a good solid one with good sharp blades is it might be a challenge to you. But just for fun, I'm going to show you how people used to do this in the good old days. But you can literally take one of your cabbages, get these loose leaves off of here. I'll show you what we're going to do with these loose leaves in a little bit. Drop your cabbage in. And if you're not a good knife user, it makes really beautiful slaw. So we'll go through and cut up most of these cabbages. Now, like I said, you don't need to use the cabbage slicer. If you can always use the good old knife and board method. Just the biggest knife you got. Cut the cabbage down into a more reasonable size, and then you can just flip it over and take your knife to it. Try to get the pieces of cabbage all about the same size, that little narrow cut like we were doing on the slicer. If it starts getting a little too wide, cut it down into a more reasonable size. You can take the core out if you want, if you don't want those big chunks of stem in your finished product. Now for the matter of all those outer leaves, those big ugly leaves, it's more cabbage. I just took them and scrubbed them real well, got all the loose dirt and the bugs and whomever else was in there, stacked them all up, and then go ahead and cut these up too. This is good veg. This is good cabbage. Break it down into a little manageable size. Slice these up too. This is still good cabbage. I don't know why people think to throw it away. I guess maybe because these bigger ribs in the leaves. I think it just gives me a little extra crunch. If you are going to use these, make sure you go a little finer. These leaves are tougher, which is maybe why people don't use them, but I think they're perfectly serviceable as sauerkraut fodder. I'm using my knife I'm using my knuckles as a guide for my knife, maintaining that depth of cut, making some nice fine shreds here. So now I'm just finishing up. Something you might want to do is you're pushing your hand out into this box, into these blades, maybe a Kevlar glove. This is a cut-proof glove. Hit the links below if you want to pick one of these up. But basically, it's what you use when you're doing a lot of cutting and you don't want to cut through your hand, which is probably, I'm thinking 90% of the time. But now here I can just shove my whole hand right down in there and get the end of this stuff chopped up. Something else I like to do when I'm making, doing my fermenting vegetables and making, especially something like with red cabbage, is I'll save some of this off and not ferment it, and I'll just put it in salads during the week as I'm having salads over with my dinner. So if you look for these in the produce department, I've got a link for them down below. Debbie Meyer's green bags, these are awesome. They are breathable plastic that allows you to keep your vegetables. I mean, literally, I've had cilantro in one of these bags for like a couple of weeks in the fridge, and it keeps. They're magic. I don't know what they're made out of, how they work, but I love just taking something like this, wrap it up in a green bag, stash it in the fridge. This will be good for a couple of weeks. It's amazing how long green bags will keep vegetables. Hit the link below and pick up a bag of these. They're cheap. They're like less than 10 bucks for 10 of them. So yeah, you want some green bags. Let's get this in the fridge. Let me show you the second ingredient now. I'm using kelp. Kelp is a seaweed. This is looks like a Korean brand that I bought in the Asian supermarket. You might even find it in your supermarket if you've got a good supermarket. But yeah, look for kelp. Experiment with the different kinds of seaweed. This is actually a fairly hard kind, dense kind, but you can literally, it's dried. Just break it up into smaller pieces. How much should you use? I don't know, what did I have? A couple heads of cabbage, so a handful of this stuff. But this is amazing for just the micronutrients in it, tons of iodine in it for your system. Great way to really get a lot of nutrition in. But just broken up, that big. Probably one more bunch, we should have enough. So this is our dried seaweed, right into the bowl. All right, next ingredient, ginger. So now for my ginger, there's a piece of ginger root, I don't know, as big as my hand, I guess. Again, depends on how much you like ginger, how much you make. I always use a lot of ginger and stuff. I'm just gonna do it like this. I like to grate it, make little smaller pieces. You can slice it with your knife and have, bigger pieces. I don't like to find big chunks of stuff in my slaw, so I like to grate it just to give it a little bit better texture. That ought to be good. Now when you're fermenting, you need to think about the salt. You want to think about a ratio of salt to the amount of vegetables that you have. I mean, I've seen a lot of people do it by taste. You can, literally fill your bowl up with vegetables, sprinkle some salt in, stir it around, mash it and stir it, get the salt mixed in, and then taste it and see, is that the way I want it to taste? Once the vegetables are fermented, you're gonna lose a little bit of that saltiness and you're gonna have more of the acid, lactic acid flavor in the vegetables. But when you are salting, just kind of as a start, if you're just starting out fermenting and you're not sure, the easiest way to do it is grab a digital kitchen scale and a big bowl, and you can weigh the vegetables and then figure 2 to 3% salt with the amount of vegetables that you have. So here, let's take a look. I'm gonna do a 2% salt on this. There's a lot of salt in the seaweed, so I'm kind of going on the lower side. And I found that I don't have a lot of trouble with mold. If you find you're fermenting things and you're getting a lot of mold growth, a lot of yeast growth, maybe you need to bump your salt up a little bit. But let's weigh this out and see what we got. So go ahead and turn your scale on. I've actually added these little labels here so I can see them better. The old ones were sort of wiping off. I like to work in the metric system in grams. So figuring pounds and ounces of my vegetables is not easy. If you can set it to grams, put your bowl on there. Then you want to hit tare. What tare does, you can see my bowl here weighs 372 grams. I don't care about that. I'm not salting my bowl. I want an empty bowl, 0 grams, tare, meaning that basically I've got nothing in my bowl. Let's add the vegetables. So you can see we've got 1,500 grams of vegetables, so multiply 1,500 times 0.02. Now let's see, 1,500 times 0.02, 2%, right? 30 grams. I like to use sea salt. This is a Celtic sea salt, the Selena Naturally brand. I've got a link below if you want to grab some. I love this stuff. It's got a ton of flavor. It's got a ton of micronutrients in it. You know, you can use, table salt, but it's that sodium chloride that's been bleached, that's been, chemically altered. Who knows what they do to that stuff. So I like to use just natural salt. You can use, a lot of people use pink salt, Himalayan salt, which is good too. There's also all those nutrients in that salt. Boosts not only your health by eating that natural salt with the extra minerals in it, but the bacteria, the microbes love to be in that little bit of a salty, delicious Celtic sea. So let's see, remember how to use the scale? Turn it on, and I've got a little dish on there. I'll hit tare and change my units to grams. And what do we decide on? 30 grams of salt. Now, my salt's a little wet. This sea salt is a natural salt. It's not completely dry, so I'm doing 35 grams of salt just to kind of account for the little bit of moisture in there. But this goes in, and then just give it a little stir around here. And try to get everything mixed together. We've got a couple of different colors of leaves. We've got all our ginger in there. And what I want to do right now is basically just get the salt on as much of the cabbage as I can. I can hear it hitting the bottom of the bowl, so I'm sort of pushing against the bottom of the bowl and turning it up. And I want to get that salt up against the cabbage leaves, and it'll dissolve the salt, but then the salt will start to bring the juice out of the cabbage, and that's really what we want, is that cabbage liquid, that cabbage juice to flow through here. So, just like everything else, you want to give it a good massage, get it nice and relaxed so it can have a pleasant ferment. But you can use your hands. If you've got one of these, if you've got a pickle packer, you could use this. It's kind of fun to do. You take out your aggressions on the vegetables and just kind of bash them. You can use, I've actually used, I'd grab a wine bottle and do the same thing with a wine bottle, or just do the more passive, peaceful massaging of the veg. All right, you get the point. I'm gonna let this sit. I'm gonna let this sit for half an hour to an hour, just to let that salt really get in and start to bring some of those liquids out. And we'll come back to this just then. All right, so this has been sitting for about half an hour, and not getting a lot of moisture out of it. Let's give it one good final knead here. You can, there's that moisture. That's what you're looking for. That's what you're trying to do, is break the cabbage down just enough that you get that purple foam coming out of there, and you know good things are gonna happen. Let's get this into the box. This box I'm using was marked 6.5 liters, and I ended up using, I guess when I was shredding the cabbages, I did 2.5 of the cabbages. So just for a rough guide, you can get an idea of what you're gonna get when you make this. So I'm gonna get this kind of evenly distributed here, nice and flat across the top. then you can put the lid in. Now my fingernails aren't dirty. This is cabbage juice. I think everything I own is purple. Get a good press. And you can see the liquid starting to come up. We're set. So this is ready to go. This is all set. We can just put this someplace warm, room temperature, about 70 degrees, and I like to let mine go for a couple of weeks before I even taste it. I think cabbage especially does really well if you just give it a couple of weeks just to kind of come onto its own. So I'm gonna stick this, I just from everything in the basement, put this. Cabbage actually does pretty well a little colder, so maybe 65, 66 instead of closer to like 72, 75 is really too warm for sauerkraut. So definitely cooler is better. So we're done. This is our Korean press box red cabbage and seaweed sauerkraut. I hope you guys enjoy this recipe. Leave me a comment below if you have some questions about how to do this or anything else about fermentation. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.